Good morning. It's Pastor Mike via a recording. I mentioned, I think, yesterday that I have a test today, and they called and they scheduled it right smack dab at the time I should be talking to you live. So I'm making this recording. I'm probably on here, so for the comments, but as I get prepped for my test, pray for me today. It all's good. It all shall be well. But these recordings, I'm only allowed to do 20 minutes, so I guess that's the upside. That we don't have to worry about going over today because it will cut me off in 20 minutes. So let's get to it. Good morning. Thanks for joining in with me. I appreciate you. I don't know who you are yet because I can only know that when we're live, and I like being live and being able to say hi to you. But I'm just going to say hi by faith and tell you I appreciate you, and let's get into the Word. Get your coffee, which I have none. That's tragic. A day without coffee is hardly a good day. A day without Pete is, just not hardly worth getting out of bed then. So get your coffee or your tea or whatever it is you're drinking. Get your Bible out and let's go to Ephesians 6. We're in this portion of Scripture, which I meant to get through yesterday, but I'm going to try to get it done today. So tomorrow we can take up the first piece of the armor. But at verse 12 it says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places." So it's important too that you see that a lot of believers have their punctuation all wrong in this verse, because they read it and they say, "For we do not wrestle," period. And churches and pastors, a lot have decided we're not going to delve into this area of deliverance and freedom and warfare, and it's just too messy, and it's just too weird, and it leads and opens the doors to and so their approach is just not to wrestle, not to deal with it. But he says, he does not say, "For we do not wrestle," period. It says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood." See, so even once you decide, okay, I'm going to go get in this fight, many times we're fighting in the wrong battle. We're fighting on the wrong hill. You have to, you ever heard that saying, pick your battles? Well, a lot of believers, we're not very good at picking our battles. The enemy doesn't mind you fighting as long as you're fighting the wrong hill, as long as you're fighting the wrong battle. So he says, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. So you have to be sure you're fighting the right battle. Because if all your attention is against a person, against someone who's doing you wrong or mistreating you or persecuting you, that's battle. He's telling you right up front that that's not your battle. The person is not the human. The human is not your problem. He says, "But we wrestle against principalities and against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against the spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places." So I wanted to just kind of break those down for you, which I've been trying to get to, for several days now. But as often happens, we go somewhere and we just park there for the duration. But I want you to again remind you that wrestling is a close contact battle, that you're not fighting from a distance. It's wrestling is close, personal. It's you feel the breath down your neck, and and he's letting you know the intensity is like that of a wrestling match, which when you study the culture of Rome, and this was very imprinted on their minds, because wrestling was like the thing of that day. They filled the Colosseums for wrestling matches. And I won't go get lost in that again today, but then he let's get into the different levels of forces that he's explaining to us to let you know what you're up against. First of all, he says you're up against principalities. He says, for we wrestle against principalities. The word principality in the Greek there is the word arche, A-R-C-H-E. And it's defined as the ruler. A ruler as in the idea of a principal ruler, a prince, which the princes were given authority from the king over other people. And in the demonic realm, Satan gives these principalities the right to rule over other spirits, and so there are principalities that are set up that in the realm of darkness, that they rule over other demons, and the demons don't have a mind of their own. Remember, they're created beings, and these angels serve at the will of these principalities. And so the reason it's important for you to understand that, again, is you know your enemy, know what you're up against. Know that these harassing demons they don't just show up, willy-nilly at your door. They've been assigned by a ruling authority, and again, it's insight. It's good to know. And then he says, against, let me go back up here. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but principalities, against powers. The word power there is the Greek word exousia. And this is best seen in the definition of the Greek word for authority over a jurisdiction. So you have principalities that have rulers of the air that are giving orders down to the level of those who've been given power or authority over jurisdictions. Read Daniel 10. In Daniel 10, remember, Daniel has been fasting for 21 days because he's under captivity when it was taken away by Babylon, but then Babylon was defeated by the Persians. And he's wrestling with God for the prophetic word that's going to speak to Israel's deliverance. And of course, the demons did not want Israel delivered. The demons never want you free. They'll let you go through all kinds of religious calisthenics and exercise and all kinds of things, but they do not want you free. Come on, somebody. They don't care how religious you get or how many times you go to church. They just don't want you to get free. And so Paul talked about these authorities over jurisdictions. Daniel had an experience where when he prayed and sought God for 21 days, God immediately sent the answer. But the answer God held up. And the reason his fast went as long as it did, and he sought God for the duration that he had to, is when the angel showed up, the angel was resisted. And the angel told Daniel, I was resisted by the prince of Persia, the ruling authority over the Persian Empire, an assigned demon, which listen, every nation has assigned demonic powers. Notice every nation has its own things to deal with. America has demonic authorities that have been given jurisdiction over America, over American politics, over American morality, over American, every facet of American culture, education, the business realm. You know, and our problems are unique compared to many in the world. But where we have this multi-trillion-dollar economy, but then men under the influence of demonic jurisdiction are hijacking this and in greed are destroying what it should be the strongest economy and the greatest blessing to the world now because of men turns into a curse. And yet you have in other nations poverty and corruption as there's assigned demons over these nations, third world nations, to keep them in poverty, to keep them in despair, to keep them in literally impoverished slavery, so to speak, to their government. I was watching a program the other day where this person was from Senegal, and it talked like in America, if you're an entrepreneur and you decide, hey, I think I'm going to start a business, you can literally go online and you can launch your business within an hour. And in a few days, you can have all that you need. You know, if you need to file a subchapter S corporation, whatever, you can get this all done in minutes, comparatively speaking. In Senegal, it takes years. You know, and the country's impoverished. It's got a lot of corruption in the government. All of this is assigned authorities over jurisdictions. You have nations that are given to sensuality, to sex trafficking. They're known for selling children. People go visit these nations because they can legally go in and buy children for their pleasure. I mean, that's an assigned authority over a jurisdiction. You know, cities in America have rulers, powers that cause these cities to be overwhelmed in violence, drug trafficking, and so on and so forth. You understand? So there's these ranking authorities. Number 3, he says, there's principalities, there's powers, rulers of the darkness of this age. And so the word rulers of darkness is the Greek word kosmokator. And it comes from that compound word cosmos, the world. That's the Greek word for world, cosmos. And kator is the word for the use of strength or to seize. And darkness is the word for skotos. So he says against spiritual, back up, the rulers of the darkness of this age. And the word age there is the word for ion. It represents over the period of time, the age. And so listen, think about what he's saying. He says, so there's these rulers of the darkness of the age. So these are powerful spirits who go to seize a people, seize a nation, seize a tribe, seize a individual with power, with strength, to hold them into captivity, while darkness, while the word darkness there means like shadiness or obscurity. So like it's like what happens in the shadiness, in the corruption. I mean, look at the corruption that's in the world. This corruption, You can't fight it in the flesh. It's a spiritual force, and this corruption causes leaders to bring death to people. It gives certain people, groups, sentences of death. It was these rulers of the darkness that inspired Hitler to kill 6 million Jews. And they seized on the age. I mean, the timing was ripe. Today, people throw the name Hitler and Nazism around, and if you disagree with somebody, you just call them, oh, you're just Hitler, having no idea what was really behind that, and then how that it was in that time, in that age, that Hitler was able to do what he did because he seized upon that moment. And of course, we'd like to think that in our age, nothing like that could ever happen again. But what can happen is, like, unique to our age today, the enemy is trying to bring in other forces, other influences, to bring people and nations and cities and churches and individuals into captivity. So he says this is the rulers of the darkness. There's so much there, but I'm on a very strict time. Oh, yes, I am. So, and he says, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. The word there, spiritual, is pneumic tikikos, and it's the word for the supernatural. When he talks about spiritual hosts of wickedness, spiritual hosts. He's letting you know that your battle is not against flesh and blood. It's spiritual. It's a spiritual force. Satan's work comes in a spiritual attack. Come on, somebody. It's supernatural. It's beyond normal. It's beyond what you can do with. Your intellect can't even wrap your mind around what's going on. And so he says it's supernatural, and he goes like, let me get this word here because this is a good one too. Against spiritual hosts of wickedness. The word wickedness there is the Greek word for porneia, which is likened to again to the word of fornication, which wickedness and here is tied to depravity. It's like just the overall depravity of the age, the iniquity, the wickedness of the age, the immorality, the sexual license and freedoms that people take, which they think is leading them to greater freedom. See, they want to be liberated. You can't stop me from defining marriage the way I want to. And God says, no, that's just spiritual wickedness. Come on, somebody. That's just spiritual wickedness. It's leading you down. It's like a slippery slope that once you go down that path, you start sliding down quickly, and the whole society starts undoing, because under the fabric and foundation of a society must be biblical morality. Because the morality will define the future of that nation, whether it will, every nation that came to an end, Rome, Babylon, Greece, all these great civilizations came to an end as a result of wickedness. Come on, somebody. And so he talks about wickedness in high places, the word epiranios, which means it's above the sky. So, the Bible talks about heaven in levels. And we know God's throne is in the third heaven. Paul gives us insight into that when he says, I knew a man who he was talking about himself. He was just trying to keep humble. He said, I knew a man, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, but he went into the third heaven. That's where God's throne, God's heaven is in the third heaven, where it's a real place. Where is it? It's way up there. But then so if there's a third heaven, as Paul talks about, then there's got to be a first and a second heaven. The first heaven would be like our atmosphere right here around earth. right? And then there's the second heaven. Remember when